I'm Kevin Hoare, and I'm here with one of our co-hosts that I haven't seen in a great while. But he's been doing a fine job on with Sunny um, on Wednesdays and sometimes on other days. Don Anderson. Don, how you doing?
They're doing fantastic. Good to see you. Yeah, it's been a while. Happy to get to rotate once in a while and see some of the other faces in captive audience. So this is always pretty cool.
It's been at least a million years of news since we've seen each other, and we have about a thousand hours of news right now to present.
Yeah,
Squeezed for your convenience into a mere 40, 45 minutes. So
we rarely run. I don't know if we've ever run out of material. Let's put it that way.
no, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to just have to cut it off and say, that's it. We've done everything we can. So, and hello, everyone watching. We've got some great stuff for you here tonight. We're going to start out by talking about the Baltimore Bridge collapse. Um, so I got to see some of the footage of this. I heard about it yesterday, but I didn't get to see it until later in the evening. And then I saw more video today, and it's like, yeah, this ship, I guess it lost power or something happened, and it hit one of the main supports for this bridge that had been there for ages. It was the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and they had 90 seconds to get people to stop driving onto the bridge or get off of it if they were on it. And there you could see in the video cars racing across the bridge. I saw the last two cars, and they were driving like 95 miles an hour to get the hell off the bridge. And some people did get killed. I think it was on the ship itself, I believe. But when you see that ship hit it, 1 minute it's just a regular old bridge and a big fat ship, and the next minute it goes down like a sack of potatoes, like it was built by a kid. And it. I guess we should be a little surprised this has not happened before, but we do have complete morons running the country in most places, especially a place like Baltimore. And so it's possible that some of the things that we aren't prepared for, such as I-5 bridge and some of these other bridges in downtown Portland, this is going to be a problem because there's all kinds of things that could trigger this, earthquakes and so on. We still don't know exactly what happened. Apparently the Astoria Bridge is very similar in structure to the Baltimore Francis Scott Key Bridge.
That's the first thing I thought. It does look like that.
That's,
And yeah, and I tell you, this is one of those things where we're all, I think most of us out here, old enough to remember the Valdez accident, the oil tanker, crash. And accidents do happen, for sure. But up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I would have automatically assumed it was an accident. I think with the Valdez, the driver had been drinking, and there's other accidents that happen. People don't follow rules, don't pay attention. People get lax and lazy, and things happen. But given the events of the last 4 or 5 years, I think you got to relook at that stuff. I mean, my first thought was if it was a terrorist attack, that would most likely have happened in the middle of the day. We didn't kill more people, sort of a thing. But I don't know that you necessarily rule that out. I mean, so here's a food for thought thing. If you're Putin and you had your pipeline blown up, which most assuredly we did it. I mean, only a couple of countries in the world could have pulled that off. Terrorists can't pull that off. So you figure United Kingdom, United States, maybe France, that's about it, right? They're not going to sit by and just let that happen. So maybe we blow up some food manufacturing plants. Maybe we take down a bridge. I mean, hey,
Well, and the thing is, and there's an old saying: never attribute to diabolical plots that can be attributed to incompetence. But I think we have a rich blend of both in charge of our nation right now, which is why it's hard to know which one of these things are going to be the determinant factor. There is a report that a sailor who served aboard the ship had reported a litany of safety issues, and including leaks in the starboard tunnel, rusted deck sockets, malfunctioning lifeboat release mechanism, unsupervised trainees, and crew members drinking on the ship. Now, these aren't new things, but I suppose it's going to take a while to figure out what happened. The thing is, if somebody actually made this happen, let's some hacker got in there and just told the ship's power supply to shut down. That's all it would take, right? Then if you do it at the right exact moment when that ship is moving and can't stop and it's heading for a bridge, then I just think that we aren't ready for somebody doing this deliberately, and we are definitely not ready for a whole variety of natural disasters that could cause this stuff. And I posted the link to the discussion about the I-5 bridge, the span over the Columbia River, and we know that when the Democrats are in charge of Congress entirely, plus they had the presidency with President Brandon, that they signed into law a bill that was supposed to do something about infrastructure. Do you see the infrastructure dramatically improving? We're 3 years later. I don't see anything happening. They move at glacial speeds to do stuff.
Well, and the thing is they don't want. The only assumption you can come to is they don't want to do anything. That's
well, or they have. Sometimes you have two leftist groups fighting against each other. Like you got the people that say Democrats will deliver infrastructure. We're going to go ahead and make sure that there's a bridge over I-5 and that we expand lanes on the highway. And then you have another group that says, but we're going to do it with tolling. And everybody's like, no. Or you have another group like they've got the Rose Quarter I-5, where they want to restructure that, move some of the buildings around because it's just a total bottleneck. And then you got groups that want to fight against that. And then sometimes you have groups that just want to fight against anybody even driving on highways at all. And we have all of them in Oregon. So we have the ultimate combination of stupid, fighting, incompetent.
And see, that's the biggest thing is they're not for improving your ability to move around. They want you to be riding on public transportation so they can control you. So all this talk about building a bridge across I-5, they're not interested in building a bridge across I-5 unless it's got room for a bunch of buses and trains that cost a fortune so that it can control your ability to move around. I mean, it's just, and the thing is, you would never have had this level of doubt, 5, 10, 15 years ago. You would have assumed it was an accident and that would have been fine. Now, because of all the lying by both the administration and the media, it leads you to speculate and guess because who knows with these people? There's been so many things they've lied about. And it turns out later that they were lying. And then they never even stop and say, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. They just keep on with more lies. So what are you to think? What do you have to think?
And these guys don't pay the price for their incompetence is what happens. They use the media to assign blame to someone else and get away with it. Then there's other times where there's intentional stupidity, where they're doing stuff where they're pretending that they're trying to address an issue when in fact they're not. They're just they're intentionally incompetent at addressing an issue because they actually agree with it. I'll give you an example. So today there was breaking news that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, yes, that you probably not heard of them because there's all these bureaus of bureaucrats all over the place. This is the federal one. And they announced that they're moving full speed ahead with the wind energy areas off the coast of Coos and Curry counties in the south coast of Oregon. It is going to be these gigantic windmills that are going to be used to generate electricity. They're going to be tethered in about 1,000 feet of water to the ocean floor. No one has ever put together a massive constellation of these types of windmills tethered in 1,000 feet to the ocean floor. I think they've had 3 windmills that they've done anything close to this, and it's even in shallower water.
The environmentalists are allowing this to happen?
Well, the environmentalists, you got one group of environmentalists that say this is the only way we can save the planet from global warming. And you got another group of environmentalists that are saying, but it's going to, and it will harm the whales. Apparently, the humming sound that is emitted from these drives the whales nuts and harms them.
I'm sure some birds are going to take a hit too.
Yeah, and then, of course, they're bird choppers as well, especially on land. And then you got on top of that, it's going to mess up prime fishing areas. So the Native American tribes in the area, as well as the Trawlers Association, the fishermen are livid. And then you've got the regular residents who don't want all of these things right off the pristine coast of Oregon.
That's going to look like hell. I mean,
yeah, it is a blight on what is an amazingly beautiful coast. I've been down there about 2 or 3 weeks ago, down in Gold Beach, Brookings. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know it well. I love that drive.
This is going to be something that they would impact, and the people there have been giving their opinion to the mandatory held listening sessions conducted by these bureaucrats. Well, our federal representation pertaining to that area, Ron Wyden, Jeff Merkley, who are U.S. senators, and most notably Congresswoman Val Hoyle, sent a letter to the Bureau of Energy Management, not telling them kill the project, or a letter to Joe Biden saying put a stop to this, but could you give us 30 more days so people in this area could give you a little bit more input about what they think the impact is going to be, such as on the environment? And the answer was no. So bureaucrats told elected officials to stick it. And you know what these elected officials have done in response?
They rolled over, right? They rolled over?
Nothing, because they never really cared about it at all. Well, one of the people running for Congress there in the 4th District, Monique Despain, put out a press release today pounding Val Hoyle for essentially failing her constituents entirely in these 2 counties. She just doesn't care about them. She loves the wind energy stuff. She spends a lot of time talking about how and you know what they called it? They called, a few years ago, the Brandon administration held a little conference of all these people that are going to make money off of this, which, by the way, it's foreign manufactured materials, foreign corporations that are being brought in to do all this stuff. And they called it the wind shot, like a moon shot, because for them, they see it as a great leap, but it also means that actually it's actually not been done before, and they're proving why it hasn't been done before, because it's stupid. Now, what Monique Despain said, because there was an article that came out that broke the news that the delay, the 30-day delay, just 30 days, has been denied. And apparently the reason for that is because there's a bunch of money in what was called the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember that thing that was supposed to reduce inflation, but it didn't? It was just a Green New Deal is what it was. And so the Inflation Reduction Act money is only going to be dispersed if they get to a certain low stage of development in 2024. So they can't wait. So a reporter with the Epoch Times got the information that this 30-day public comment period extension was denied, contacted Hoyle, Wyden, and Merkley, got no comment, but got a comment from Monique Despain. And here's what her press release said. I think, did I post this here? So she said that, this is a career politician, Congresswoman Val Hoyle, and she's blown it again. Kind of a pun, but unfortunate, because actually it does mean she's let people down. And said she's failed to heed the pleas of her constituents who oppose this stuff. And I've been down there. These people are really angry. They go to these listening sessions. They wouldn't even let a lot of people talk who were part of the local cadre of local elected officials. They put them on Zoom. They muted them so that only the people in Washington, D.C. could talk over everybody. That's a listening session. Anyway,
Well, either way, at the end of the day, they're gonna. This stuff is all like
the railroad job.
nice photos. Right? They're gonna do what they're gonna
Well,
do
and
anyway.
that's because
to
this
the
is core to this plan where they're going to just try to take the entire coastline of the United States and put all these windmills everywhere. Well, you know what happened when they did this in New Jersey? It lost $6 billion. It went bankrupt. In order to cover the cost, they tripled people's electricity rates in order to pay for it. And so here's what she said. Val Hoyle made a big deal about requesting 30 more days of public input, but she and our 2 U.S. senators are not enough of a big deal in D.C. to make that minor accommodation happen. So much for the influence of career politicians. But she went after and says, but her failure to boldly and unequivocally oppose this project speaks volumes. Lacking the sway to get even the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to allow more phony listening sessions, and they are phony. That Boehm and Hoyle weren't listening to anyway is already bad enough. But given Val Hoyle's track record of ignoring the priorities of voters in the 4th District on issue after issue, it stands to reason she's actually fine with this offshore wind debacle and couldn't care less what the constituents in her district think, want, or need.
Yeah, you have to make the assumption that it's in her personal best interest to do that. And I think that's now, however, whatever that looks like in terms of, getting liked in DC or paid in DC. That's what this stuff all boils down to.
It does. And I think to a great extent, it also puts the lie to that these people really care about anybody locally. Their loyalties are to out-of-state, big special interests, DC lobbyists who are crony capitalists pulling up to the trough to load their bank accounts full of money that, by the way, is being printed and borrowed. And the other thing is all these people that were going to provide input, they were saying it's unsafe. In fact, what happens if a Columbus Day storm like the one we had in 61 or 62 hits? Apparently it'll just wreck these things. They'll just show up as debris all over the coast.
Maybe that won't be a bad thing.
Yeah, well, but then there goes all that electricity while they're closing. They're getting rid of hydroelectric dams, which use gravity and water to generate electricity, renewable by my estimate. And they're closing down natural gas, and they close down the coal power plant. They're closing down natural gas facilities or not letting them be built. They're making us dependent on this stuff. So, and these are giant boondoggles that have lost so much money. And I think this is going to be important to send people who really have the ability to make decisions and listen to people to DC. This is going to be the year to do it. Do it this year or forget it. And you know what? Some people are actually saying, you know what? Forget it. There's some news about the census data. They track the census. They actually do estimates every year, right? And one of the things that they do in these estimates is try to figure out what has happened with the census figures since they took the official full census, right? And apparently, census data shows that Oregon's population growth has noticeably slowed in 2023. We are a place that's typically been growing as a state. And we might be heading for California territory where we actually see the state shrinking in population because people are trying to get out. And
the wrong people are trying to get out. The ones who pay the taxes, the ones who pay the freight, the ones who are decent and honest, and the ones who are left are not, or they are stuck for a variety of reasons. That's kind of inevitable.
Yeah, so it says here both urban and rural counties in Oregon in the state saw a population decrease of more than 6,000 in the span of 1 year. And so people are saying the hell with this. Now, look, if we elect the right people, I think we can turn things around, but we have to stand and fight. So if anybody's staying, You better reach into your pocket, start donating to people that are fighting the good fight and standing up to these guys. And it's not going to happen because we just want it or wish it. We're going to actually have to, you know, stand and fight. It says here that the Portland metro area essentially remained flat or 0.03% decline. The pandemic is over. All the things that are happening now cannot be blamed on the pandemic, which is what they tried to do. So now we are starting to see the real results of this, and it is a decline. And you know what happened in California? They saw 1 million people leave California in the span of 10 years. It used to be a state that had been growing constantly for, since the 20s or something, and became the nation's most populous state. Well,
that's what happens when you become a one-party state. It happens everywhere all over the world where this occurs. This is what happens. Eventually, they will destroy the economy, destroy morality, and then productive citizens will leave, and the ones that are left are either stuck or it benefits the amoral. And that's precisely what you see in Portland.
Yeah, they're tearing it.
I named the cities, right, because the rural areas aren't like that, but the cities, which unfortunately hold the votes, they become just cesspools.
Well, and by destroying the rural economy, which is another topic we're going to get to here in a second, they started depopulating rural areas because they just deprived it economic opportunities. So you're allowed to have low-paying tourism and nothing else. Maybe not even that. But now...
And then in the cities, the young people can't afford to rent or buy a place. Even rent's impossible.
That's right.
For young people.
Well, and then this news item hit, which is that apparently downtown Portland's office vacancy rate is the highest in the nation, which means that businesses can't afford to locate there or are leaving at a faster rate than anyone can replace them, which means that it's shrinking. The economy in Portland is shrinking. Now, they've done a lot more to make that happen than just make it expensive.
No question about it. Yeah, and you got to figure it's probably worse than what they're reporting, because if you signed a lease, and it's like, say, a 10-year lease, you may not even be operating there right now, but it's not showing up on the books as a vacant property because the lease is getting paid, even though the storefront property might be empty. And if you go through downtown Portland middle of the day now, it's kind of shocking. I mean, I think I was there last summer. I try to stay out of there, but I was just shocked at how few people there were. Yeah, they had cleaned up most of the mess, but there's no people there because A, people are scared to go there, and B, there's nothing to go to anymore like there used to be. When you don't enforce the law, this is what happens. And here's the horrendous part about it. Even if you reverse it, who in their right mind would go back to Portland in the near term? You'd want to wait a long time to see if they really are going to enforce the law, if they really do have a two-party political system, if things are going to be fair and balanced. I mean, I just don't see this. It's a long-term project after you've done what Portland's done.
It is. It won't be reversed overnight. It is reversible. I will say that. I think that's important, an important point to make, because a lot of people are convinced that it's hopeless, but we've seen, what happens is if you don't fix it here, then these people just follow you to whatever state you're going to. In fact, I hear a lot of people go to Arizona. Hey, Democrat governor, 2 Democrat members of the U.S. Senate, right? How long is that going to stay a place that you want to live in with people running it like that?
Eventually you got to drop your bags and fight. I know a lot of people talk about running, but you're gonna have to stop and fight somewhere. That's the bottom. It might as well be here, because you're absolutely right. What leftists do is they destroy where they are, and then once they can't stand their own cesspool, they go to someplace nice and then vote for the same.
It's like when in science fiction, when you have these aliens that just go from planet to planet, using up all the resources, killing whatever native species are there, and moving on. That's what the Democrats do. Now, why they do it is maybe different than the aliens, but I don't know. I'm not going to try to explain it. I know that we have to stop it. Now, one of the things they did in sort of doing in the rural economy is that they, in service to an owl, the spotted owl, that was not in the end actually being killed or threatened by logging, they stopped all the logging in vast areas of the state. There used to be pretty wealthy areas of the state, high working class incomes, uh, great infrastructure, great schools, places like Coos Bay and North Bend, for instance. And now they're like in this
Mhm.
depression. Many of these
Yeah.
places, Reedsport, they've been overwhelmed and turned into fentanyl and meth camps. You know, huge swaths of drug addicted folks moved in, or and then people just left, or the children that were looking for jobs just left. Well, this is
Well, they have to.
they have to, and this
Yeah.
is caused by trying to save an owl, which is actually being killed by another owl. The barred owl was
Yeah.
killing the spotted owl. So what have they done? Well, they've decided to start. They so they killed the logging industry. Now they want to make sure that no one can actually log at all. They're calling them climate
Mhm.
forests. They're making politicians sign old growth pledges, which say if it's 80 years old, you can't cut it down. Someone went and tried to challenge this at the U.S. Supreme Court because there's a law in the books called the ONC uh, uh, law of 1937, which
Mhm.
was intended to make it so that you could support local services by having a percentage of the harvest that takes place on public lands. That
Mhm.
money goes to the county and the city so they can afford to have a police and fire and schools and
Mhm.
infrastructure.
Mhm.
And then, of course, a lot of stuff has been forced into these national monument areas that are simply declared by the president. And
Mhm.
there's a challenge to that too, that they're violating the what's called the
Mhm.
Antiquities Act. Well, the Supreme Court decided not to hear the case. Um, it's called a writ of certiorari, a
Mhm.
petition, which is to take a case. The Supreme Court doesn't take all the cases. The appeals
Right.
courts usually do, but then once
Mhm.
they make their decision, like the Ninth Circuit, then someone can appeal it to the Supreme Court. And unfortunately, they did not. They're not going to get heard. So they're going to put tens of thousands of acres into what they call the Cascade Siskiyou Monument. And Oregon counties that were, because you can't charge property tax for stuff that's stuck into these um, public lands and monuments. You can't do
Mhm.
anything. So if your
Mhm.
county is like 70% federal land and you can't harvest anything on it and you can't charge property tax, you can't survive. You can't actually have
And see,
peace.
there's something inherently wrong with the federal government owning huge portions of states. I mean, it's just wrong. Um, and I'm just amazed that that hasn't been addressed. And maybe it will be here soon. But in my opinion, it will be in an ideal world. We get a president like a Milieu down there. Was it Argentina? These agencies just have to go away. They just have to go away.
Well, and uh, there are areas around these cities like Reedsport, downtown Reedsport's okay, but then there's little pockets around these cities that are just like really bad. And one of the things that's noted here is that because they have reduced the timber harvest, the Democrats have just gone and done it. They just made it happen, right? They
Mhm.
created negotiations where they forced all of the timber companies to just only on even on private lands harvest only a certain amount of timber. Well, the threat that
Mhm.
the state would do something to prevent them from operating. It's caused a 43% reduction in the timber harvest in just from between 2021 and 2024. So now all these mills are closing because they can't afford to get locally harvested logs. In fact, the mills that are staying open
Mhm.
are getting the stuff from other countries now. We have an abundance of this stuff, and these guys are not letting us use it. So this is really sending rural Oregon down a path that they can't. So we just talked about urban Oregon. We talked about rural Oregon. Is anyone surprised that people are leaving the state? And now it turns out they're also fighting against any forest management and declaring, because of climate change, because apparently we control the planet's weather. There you go. They say because of climate change, they're going to force forests to not be touched at all because they are carbon sinks. They absorb carbon. Now, I don't know. They also don't seem to acknowledge the fact that a lot of CO2 is released when you allow wildfires to burn out of control, but they take no responsibility for that. On top of that, the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, the other BLM, both of them are bad, but this one's bad for a different reason, because they just sit around and allow fires to burn out of control on federal land, and then it comes over and catches state lands and private lands on fire and creates these giant wildfires that we have to deal with every year that turn the skies into a hellscape of allergy and asthma and other illnesses. Well, apparently now there's a die-off of Douglas firs due to heat. They say drought, heat, and a beetle. Now the drought, I think, has been alleviated a lot because of the rains this past year, but they're starting to see a die-off of Douglas firs, and now there's dead trees everywhere, and they still don't want to harvest them.
Well, I tell you, I think at the minion level, these arguments have to be had. But at the top of the food chain, I think it's all strategic, and the objective overall is all of these things are designed to weaken the United States. That's it's completely intentional. To weaken the United States, to make us lesser on the world stage, and set the stage for a one world government. That's where that's what it's all about.
Well, they've decided that CO2 is pollution. How soon will they decide that oxygen is pollution? I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Or water?
They've already decided that, or people.
Well, that's ultimately where I'm going with this. And you know what? I think if you dig into this, the Democrats have such a religious fervor for the Church of Global Warming, which they cloak in climate change garments, that they're willing to do anything. So let me give you some proof. Washington governor, and it's our twice the size idiotic neighbor to the north, who sometimes we do things first and they copy us, and sometimes they do things first and we copy them. The governor, Inslee, is expected to sign a bill that literally paves the way for a full-on natural gas ban. Natural gas to be banned. They call it a phase out because apparently they are going to control the world's weather with it. And they say that it's all supposed to be underway by 2030. 2030. That's 6 years. Yeah. He's trying to decide right now if he's going to veto parts of this bill, but they have a program up there that is called, what is it called? Has a name. It's like the Climate Energy Policy or something, Climate Commitment Act, which is to do away with the state's carbon, they plan to get rid of all of the carbon based energies, all of them.
So you think about this. So the decisions of one state are supposed to affect the world's climate. Even if you made the assumption that this stuff would make it was legit, which it isn't. So we're gonna basically citizens of Washington are going to suffer massively for absolutely nothing. What's the impact of the single state going to do? It's just crazy. Meanwhile, India, Russia, all the other countries continue to pollute like mad.
Well, they do. And so even if we thought we were doing something, we're making no difference, but we're also making no difference. That's the other thing. But they believe in this so fervently that they're actually willing to destroy the ability of people to stay warm, cook food, warm the water in their homes. And here's what a Democrat said. He said that is in favor of this bill that is in front of the governor now. The state is moving away from natural gas. Consumers are making that choice. Really? Why is a mandate? How's a mandate leaving it to consumers? If it were up to consumers, then it would already be happening.
It's kind of like making the choice to get a vax shot.
So this is BS. He didn't even get through one sentence of his 3 sentences, and it's totally garbage.
Mhm.
The question is, are we going to plan so we can make that an orderly transition, or are we not going to plan for it? I think it makes a lot more sense for an orderly transition. This is not an orderly transition, unless by orderly they mean guys in a hospital that wrestle you to the ground when you feel like insanity has finally happened.
They hate freedom. They just hate freedom, and they hate the middle class.
Which is why them saying that consumers are making this choice. It's like, no, dude, you're making this choice. You're imposing it on everyone else. Well, so here's what an opponent said, a Republican, Linda Wilson from Vancouver. So listen up, because that's your neighborhood, right?
Yep,
In
that's
most
right.
homes, you've got a gas water heater, maybe a gas fireplace, a gas cooktop, and you would have to replace all of those with electric. That's going to cost somewhere between $40,000 and $70,000 per home. When you're looking at 900,000 gas customers in the Puget Sound Energy Service Area, that's a lot of people. And this is all supposed to be happening by 2030. That's only 6 years away. Now, there is some good news. She noted that this could all be moot if voters this November pass what's called Initiative 2117. Somebody somehow got this on the ballot, probably through signature gathering, to repeal the Climate Commitment Act that was passed by the legislature and do away with this phony carbon credit market. The critics are saying that gas prices have actually been driven up already. So they're already trying to price people out of it. And the lieutenant governor called this bill to phase out natural gas. He called it a hot mess. So even some Democrats are like, They aren't listening to groups like the Building Association, Industry Association of Washington, who detailed clearly how this is going to impact something that we've heard endlessly about. They say they're going to solve, called housing affordability. You just won't be able to afford a house. They'll put all these requirements on it to make the houses that have to convert too expensive because you have to convert them. And then the new houses will be too expensive because they're all going to have this gold-plated stuff that everybody's trying to switch to all at once. There's no logic here, is what they said.
Well, they can herd into government housing, though.
Well, that's it. Government housing with no hot water, no way to cook food. You'll have a solar panel hooked up to a tiny element there that'll take about 75 minutes to boil water. And you know what? You'll own nothing. You'll eat bugs, and you'll be happy about it. Where does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
See, they didn't say how they were going to get us there. Everybody imagined that this would be some orderly process, but instead what they're going to do is make it so that they deprive you of civilization. All you got left is eating the cockroaches that are scurrying around.
Yeah, those tents that they're handing out to the homeless. They want the entire middle class in a tent.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Why? Here's how you solve the housing problem: make everyone homeless, and then stop calling it homeless. There you go.
Apparently, that's the solution.
Well, shifting back to Oregon here, it looks like they're saying that the balance of power in the Oregon House could be up for grabs. There are currently 21 districts in the Oregon House that are represented by Democrats, and 18 are represented by Republicans. That are going to be on the chopping block here. Or I guess this is the state legislature as a whole. So yeah, that was actually referring to the Senate. Anyway, or combined both. But what's going to happen is the question will be, we went from 37 seats of Democrats down to 35. Could we get from 35 to 30 or 29 Democrats? And, this is an analysis of it. I think this is the way we have to think, is that we've got to swing for the fences here and do everything we can in a year where Joe Biden is on the ballot, because I think he's going to hurt
Yeah,
everyone.
that is true. I mean, and the visible pain that they have caused over the last 3 or 4 years, and the local ones too. I mean, you look at the crime, for example, in Portland, specifically Portland. It's like it's unbelievable, and it's directly attributed to their policies. The drugs, again, directly attributable to things that they have specifically done. Um, Strike while the iron's hot. People feel it, no matter what the media is lying and saying about it. People walk around and they feel it when they go to the grocery store. They see their neighborhood. They know they can't drive down certain roads. Don't be out at night. It wasn't like that 5, 10 years ago.
No, it wasn't.
Um,
That's exactly right.
yeah, and so you don't have to be. It's one of these things where people have a hard time, I think, lifting their heads up and actually thinking. So sometimes they have to be hit in the head by a 2x4 to understand the ramifications of what's being discussed here. One would think that it would be very obvious that someone said to you, "We're going to remove half the police force. We're going to defund the police, and things will get better." Like, who would believe that? Who would buy into that? But a certain percentage of the population just is not capable of registering that until they get robbed, mugged, their wife gets beaten up, whatever it is, and then they finally make the leap.
Yeah, I just saw the other day that a conservative is actually a Democrat that's been mugged by reality, and it's very true. Now, speaking of mugged, there was a Jewish woman who was simply walking in Portland to a pro-Israel event. There was one held downtown. I forget exactly where. And while she was doing this, she was viciously harassed by the downtown. As you know, Antifa is essentially merged with the pro-Hamas groups in downtown Portland. And they started going after her. And Andy No got a hold of the video. He's the intrepid reporter that reports on Antifa. They assaulted and nearly tried to kill him. And so there's video of showing what they did. Apparently, they went up to this person, said, you effing white B word. Exclusive video. Here it is. A Jewish woman in downtown Portland was pursued and threatened by Antifa after attending a rally against Hamas. The woman had to ask 2 men to help her get to her car. Fortunately, there are still 2 men in Portland. I think the rest have transitioned. But Antifa repeatedly referenced the victim's perceived race, which is interesting because, you don't know what a person's race is all the time, but they just decided that she was apparently a white, what. And so the men helping her, they called them fascists, white supremacists, and Zionists. This occurred all the way back on March 8th, and it's only being published now because the victims need the video censored due to fears that they will be targeted further. Portland police have made some arrests that day, but did not release a statement. And so you can actually see the details here. And if you go, I'll post this because it's actually worth sharing for people who say that this isn't happening. They can watch the video, and maybe it's just, I think it's just a coincidence, really, but Lori Chavez DeRemer, who's the 5th Congressional District member of Congress, first Republican woman elected from Oregon, and the first Republican in the 5th District in like 25 years or 30 years. Anyway, she's putting forward a bill to fight anti-Semitism on college campuses. Might need it in Portland, too, it looks like. The Protecting Students on Campus Act. And to give them recourse so that they can actually be protected as a civil rights violation when they are treated this way.
Well, I tell you, there's a silver lining in this stuff, and it may be this: of the constituencies that are most likely to vote Democrat, outside of blacks, Jewish Americans are like number 2. They probably vote Democrat in the 80 percentile range.
Time to get smart.
Reasons that absolutely make no sense. This is, if there was ever a group of people that they despise and hate and go after, it's the Jews. And maybe it takes stuff like this for people to finally recognize and wake up. We saw what happened with the college campuses with the professors. They completely laid down and basically said it was okay to like do what you want with Jews on campuses. And these kinds of things, I think, are I hate to use the word good to say this, but maybe it'll shake them into reality and realize that party is not helping you. It's hurting you the same way that what they've done to blacks in terms of taking police off the streets has destroyed their neighborhoods. Letting immigrants come in is causing a shift there as well. So, it's ugly, but maybe that's the good that comes out of
Might
it.
be the wake up call that is needed. It says here 73%. There was a survey that was done, a scientific survey. 73% of Jewish college students surveyed have experienced or witnessed some form of anti Semitism on campus since the beginning of the 2023 school year, which was, of course, like August, September of last year. So dating really from October 7th, right?
It's, it's just unimaginable. I mean, when I was in college, I hate to say how long ago, it was like 40 something years ago, this sort of stuff never happened, man. I mean, there were people protesting on campus. We had the communists on campus. We had all of that stuff going on, but nobody was beating people up, throwing bricks, spitting up, and none of this stuff was
Well,
happening.
let me ask
You
you
could speak your
something.
mind.
If it's happening now,
Uh,
who are the Nazis that are
mhm.
perpetrating it?
Yeah, yeah. This stuff sounds like Kristallnacht almost,
Well,
right?
Antifa
I mean,
style, because they've been given carte blanche to do a lot of what they're doing. I mean, these guys aren't going to jail in droves. They don't have the FBI
yeah,
investigating them and doing racketeering charges against them for coordinating criminal activity and violence across state lines. And no, they're not doing any of that. So it's the people. That's how the Kristallnacht happened. It was because suddenly there was a new governance that was going to just allow these different groups to go out and do what they did in 1933, I think it was.
right, right.
Once the authorities are fine with it, it's going to happen in significant. Well, that's what's happened. That's why it's
Well,
happening.
these are the brown shirts, right? These are our brown shirts, the Democrat brown shirts who are doing this stuff, and clearly it's strategic. It's selective enforcement of the law, and we see that up and down the line.
Yeah, and then we saw some
Um,
university presidents apparently lacked moral clarity on this issue altogether, which is part of what led to this. So we're in dangerous times until people get their heads out of their keisters, and it takes this wake up call to recognize it. So more power to Lori on getting this bill passed. Let's see how Democrats vote on it, because they seem to be doing things like voting present or even voting against these things. And I think as the weeks and months go by since October 7th, when supposedly everyone was united in support of Israel and fighting back against Hamas, I think today it's safe to say that the Biden administration has slid into an opposition point of view. They're lecturing Israel on how to deal with Hamas, which is to let Hamas win, or certainly let them off the hook and let them survive to fight another day. And fortunately, Benjamin Netanyahu is telling the Brandon administration, forget it. Unless you can just make those 1,200 citizens that were killed come back, some of whom were Americans, about which Biden has little concern, apparently. Well, so there is another big news story here in the state. It's actually kind of dominated the headlines. I kind of consider it a tempest in a teapot, except that it's really, there is some, I don't know if it's meant to be a distraction because we have all these problems they aren't solving. They declared emergencies about homelessness and addiction. Does it look like they're solving it like it's an emergency?
They're just now declaring it an emergency.
They did this months ago, and declaring an emergency apparently has resulted in what?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I find this interesting. When you
They
drive
did
around,
press releases,
and suddenly it's like it's not as visible as it was a year or two ago. It's like they went through, and I've not driven all over Portland, but the main arteries are way cleaner than they were before. But they haven't solved it. So my question is, where are they?
They show up somewhere. They push them to other areas. That's one of the problems, is that they push them out of one area, they show up somewhere else. And then a few weeks later, Multnomah County, which is undermining the city's policy, hands tents and granola bars and bottles of water to these guys, and they come back to areas where they once were, and it just gets moved around. No one's leaving
I
Portland.
wonder, yeah, I wonder if the strategy is to move them off the main arteries, so that way visitors and that sort of thing don't see it.
That's part of it, but the crime is still rampant, and
Oh,
so
okay.
wherever they are moving, they're taking the crime and the open air drug dealing with them. Now, granted, the Measure 110 reform stuff has just happened, but how do you ramp up enforcement in a city that actually is down several hundred police officers from the minimum level needed to maintain security in the city? How do you ramp up arrests?
Not to mention, how do you get the trust of the police officers again after you did that to them? I mean, the city went after them harder than the protesters did. So if you're a police officer, you figure a lot of them just left, and the ones that are left are like hanging on for retirement. And who would want to join it? I mean, becoming a police officer in Portland, I don't know,
Well, so
unless they get a
but let me
change.
talk about
Yeah.
the Tempest in the Teapot. It is the first spouse or first lady. I don't know which one they're calling her, because all this gender stuff has made it impossible to figure out what anybody really is anymore. There is no such position in existence in the state of Oregon. It's not, you don't make money, you're not compensated. It is not an
Yeah.
office. Um,
Mhm.
but apparently, Tina Kotex decided that this is one of her top priorities. And one of the problems with it is it's derailing attention focused on everything else. Um, which, see, you would think somebody who's smart and wants to get reelected would be trying to make sure that their policy agenda gets addressed. Well, even Willamette Week is starting to get a little panicky about this. So Nigel Jaquist is the one that exposed this. He's the intrepid reporter for Willamette Week who's broken some of the
Mhm.
biggest stories, including the one that led to the resignation of John Kitzhaber back in 2015.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
he's won like Pulitzer Prizes. So now this thing's mushroom. Now you got one part of the media on the Oregonian starts putting a puff piece in here about Tina Kotek's wife, that she's in recovery from alcoholism and lives with mental illness, because that is a good reason to establish a paid compensated office with staff. Two of Tina Kotek's staffers have actually quit over this because they objected to the idea that there should be this office where people are compelled to report to somebody simply because that is the spouse of Tina Kotek. And now there is, and Lars Larson called this out. Lars Larson said voters didn't elect her wife; they elected Kotek, right?
Yeah.
But she's kind of moving full speed ahead on this. I think
Mhm.
this is an attempt to distract everybody. But now there's
Mhm.
an ethics complaint that's been filed. Apparently, it's been filed with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, and it would seem that whenever Kotek travels to other states, she takes
Mhm.
a the an entire security detail with her and a personal assistant. And over the course of 6 months, all this added up to $143,000 in spending, which, um,
Yeah.
there. So this ethics complaint has been filed. The details are not yet have not yet been revealed, but it's a protest that is meant to head off the creation of the official first spouse office in Oregon. And
Yeah. Well,
uh, this is what Oregon is apparently focused on right now instead of solving any of the problems that are literally raping the state.
it's the mindset of a dictator. I mean, this is precisely how these banana republic type dictators behave. Not to mention, rappers behave this way too, traveling around with their entourage, just blowing a wad of money. At least in their case, it's their money.
Well, you know what I want? I want Taylor Swift to comment on this because I really want to know what she thinks about it. Because that's what we need is we need to turn this into a story that everybody's talking about. Because you know what we aren't doing? We aren't talking about solving any of the problems that are just destroying the state. That's why I
Mhm.
think that this is
Yeah.
actually just a giant game. And there are details here about the staffers that quit,
Mhm.
that were just upset that this is actually even being attempted. And it
Yeah. What I wonder is the mainstream press, is the Oregonian, for example, or the news reporting this?
Yeah, this is actually that's where I'm getting this from, which is what's amazing about it. So there's three staffers: the chief of staff, Andrea Cooper, the deputy chief of staff, Lindsay O'Brien, and the special advisor, whatever that is, Abby Tibbs, are all
Mhm.
departing the office in the coming weeks. And this isn't the usual time when this would happen, but it is starting to take on
Mhm.
some of the same contours of what we saw when Sylvie Hayes, the um, first girlfriend, um, not
Mhm.
not the first girlfriend that Kitzhaber ever had, but the as first
Mhm.
lady slash girlfriend of John Kitzhaber, ended up being besieged by ethics complaints and then leading to his resignation and then of course fines that he received. This is a real
Mhm.
thing, and I actually would like to see how this plays out. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I don't
Mhm.
think anyone's going to be resigning over this. But at the same time, she's declared emergencies. This is not the emergency that the state needs. this is this is
Yeah.
the distraction and the BS that's symbolic of how ineffective and stupid our leaders are.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, maybe it's another piece of the two by four that people have to get to stop voting for people like this.
That's right.
Um,
Meanwhile, our attorney general, who could be making sure that we had less crime in Oregon, has decided to head off to
mhm.
Washington, D.C. to join people in protests in favor of pro-choice policies on the steps of the Supreme Court. This should tell you everything you need to know, because apparently the Oregon Health Authority has launched a special website about abortion access in Oregon. And so this is the other thing. Besides getting people to talk about first spouse offices that there's no basis
Mhm.
for in law, they're going to spend a lot of time talking about pro-choice policies and abortion in a state where the equivalent of Roe versus Wade is already encoded in the law. So be wary, because when you talk about distractions, they're convinced this one's going to work. They're
Yeah.
convinced that they can actually sway the outcome of an election and win an election they absolutely shouldn't by talking about an issue that doesn't matter in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, it's nutty. It is nutty.
So, well, we hit all the treetops tonight. I know that we probably missed something, but if you don't think Oregon is a loony bin of insanity and that people aren't figuring it out, then just watch the census numbers as people stream out of the state. Having said that, we did hear of a couple of elected officials that are fighting back, or at least one that is running to be a congresswoman in the 4th district, Anita Spain,
Mhm.
Lori Chavez Dreamer in the 5th, who are doing some of the right things to combat this.
Mhm.
I hope we get to tell more of those stories in the future, but that'll only happen if we join the fight. And yes, Shelley Bosshart Davis is also calling out the way agriculture is treated in the state. I wanted to cover that story too, but I couldn't find it easily. And maybe we'll cover that on a
Yeah.
subsequent night, because um,
Mhm.
it's getting easier to make a list of the things that Oregon is friendly about, because the things that they're unfriendly towards are vast. Um,
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for joining me
Well,
here tonight, Don.
yeah, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it as always. It was great to get to see you once again, and to the rest of the guys, I'll hopefully see you next
Yep.
Wednesday.
And please, everyone, thanks for watching, and share this show with everyone you can. There's just a whole bunch you can learn from every show, and a lot of people who need to hear it with a little tongue in cheek sense of humor that we like to present it. So thanks to all, and
Yeah.
have a great night. And we'll be back on Friday. I don't know who's going to be on Friday. We just figured this out a day at a time, but we still seem to be coming back with great shows like last night with Jeff Reynolds. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you again on Friday.